last talk with Anna, the last talk of this panel and of this conference. Anna Serrano Tellería is PhD, professor and member of the project Public and Private in Mobile Communications. She is a lecturer of cyberculture. She has received several grants, and her main areas of research are media studies, online communication and design, performing as stage names. Liquid spheres or constellations, reflections towards mobile devices, is the theme that Anna Serrano will present.
Thanks, Katarina, for the kind presentation. Well, thanks you all for being here awake, listening to me. It's a pleasure sharing with you, let's say, my last reflections about the public and private sphere and mobile phones. Well, this is why the reason for my title is Liquid Sphere or Constellations, because in the first stages of my research, well, I started considering this concept of the liquid spheres, but recently I started doubting about the suitability of this concept, so I started reflecting about the constellations instead of liquid spheres. In this sense, I was happy to see the presentation of Jill when he talks about the fractal. And I say, well, maybe I'm not alone. Reflecting about how to explain this, well, how we deal with these spheres. Well, we also have a wide variety of perceptions, and also regarding intimacy, as we could have seen this morning, these modulations inside. Well, let's start to have a quick, well, you all know about this, but I would like to introduce these key quotes, because it has been important for me during all my research. Well, we have been talking a lot about the technology, how technology shape us, and that's the reason for me to remember McLuhan. Then the Homo Ludens of Russell, when he, just in 1988, reflect about how these technologies, for the first time, were simulating the nervous system. Then I attached to the, well, I really like the concept of the human beings as a portal that Wilma introduced, where we are reachable whenever we want, whenever we will be. The liquid modernity of Bauman, that I think is not needless to explain, you all are aware about it. And then the concept of the media life introduced by Joyce, when he tries to explain how we deal with the media. It's a very simple way to explain, but I really like it, because I think that the main difference is before we living with the media, but now we are living in the media. Then, as you all know, when Goffman performance between the front stage and the back stage, in this sense, Merowitz introduced how these electronic technologies were increasingly exposing areas that before were private. Also, how Sennett reflect about it when he says the people in the world of Goffman behaved but had no experience, where the media was converting this private space into merchandise. So remember McLuhan, the medium is the message, and it seems even more here in mobile devices that the prosumer has become the merchandise. Well, once we have this quick introduce, you will know, but for me, they have been key quotes to follow. The preliminary state of the art review within this project was this paper, and here is where I started to perceive this liquidity in the spheres. Why? Because following the technology of intimacy is a concept introduced by Bennett, Carney, Boyce, and Hancock, explaining how we deal with the technological system and how these dimensions were increasingly blurry. They established these different degrees. When we start to slide all the state-of-the-art review within these dimensions, it becomes really difficult, because all the concepts that arise were mixed in all the dimensions. Then I will to make us a quick review about when Hannah Arendt explained that the common world is not by the common nature of men, but that we are all interested in the same subject. So something that I always remember, and also Habermas, when we deal with social media. Regarding the concept of the communication portal, on this human ecosystem, I remember Battinson and also Elias about this interdependence. So this image of man always in interrelation with. So we arrived to our first trial definition about what the human being as a communication portal means for us. Well, it means that this communication portal is defined in every moment by the attitude and the way we are dealing with the surrounding environment, the public and the private sphere, and our participation in the common space. Alter the dimensions, time and space, the basic coordinations of communications, the human being becomes the manager of these spheres, and the same action will be considered public and private in the same physical space depending on a specific situation. We could remember all our colleagues talking here about audiences, about context, about how we deal with content, about the platforms. Let's have a just very quick remembering about the Heidegger's concept of Dasein, how we construct our identity in that specific moment in this space of thoughts and time castells within the perpetual contact introduced by academic Hans. So our main research questions to start with were these ones. Does the amplification of our human abilities, which are diluted in this space and time dimensions and continuous flow of data, alter the implementation of part of our identity on the possible profiles? When I mean profiles, I mean in a very wide way. I include a digital identity. But for users, we have perceived that they do not have a clear idea what a profile is and what an identity, digital identity is. They have confused about these technological concepts. So how can we control such technology that allows us to flow this way, remembering these homoludens introduced by Flusser? Will new coordinates and dimensions in the definition of communication emerge? Because this timeless time and no space, we always have established communication with the time and space coordinates. So how can we define the communication when these coordinates, these basic coordinates are altered? So, therefore, the aspect of this analysis as well as the modes and models of communication. It is possible to achieve a deep level of interaction between people we never meet. I remember a study of youngsters in Spain when they say that they feel even closer some relationships only by social media. Well, will the balance between authenticity and anonymity, privacy and functionality delimit those public and private spheres? Or are we placed in front of a game, constant game between obscurity and hypervisibility that allows us to reach out that spotlight of attention? What will be the scope of this common space? Describe, remember, and add. In this sense, I'm taking into account the importance of the temporal priority. It's another key, not only memory, but the temporal priority as a variable. It is proposed analysis of the concepts of space appropriation, profile, and willfulness, just to focus ourselves on these three concepts, on a perspective that places the human being as this communication portal. Well, once we start with this first, this is the first approach to our research. Now I'm going to make a very quick, because most of the concepts have already appeared here during the conference, but I would like you to show a bit what will be, for me, in this international review of the state of the art, the key concept that we have here. First, the individual as a portal, the IP coordination introduced by Lynn, the privatization of the public space, and that virtual space that always is with us, by Amparo, the perpetual contact, the serial and nomadic intimacy once we are carrying with us this spiritual space, how we deal with this intimacy. And well, here I remember Sennett when he mentioned that the personality in public is considered, well, that appearance is an indicator of character, which results in the private individual's anxiety, which is starting also to appear within the feedback in this, mainly in the social media, no? When people are waiting for the answers. Then we have the main characteristics of the digital media, the constant, no rules, no values clear, constantly changing, updating, connecting, and being revised. Link, and this link was, I consider it very interesting, introduced by Aguado, when he made the comparison between this liquidity And the characteristics of the liquid light, the fluidity, the transience, the reticularity, dissolution of borders and boundaries defines. Within an legal environment where policies and terms and conditions were ambiguous. Apart from the liquidity observed, we remember also the McQuail when these reflections about the acceleration and the dislocation, the conception and the role of identity, this fluidification of technological, institutional and cultural dimensions. Then the integration with the senses and the body attachment that mobile phones allow us, this continuous partial attention because of that, of our nervous system having to be in this always up state. As a consequence, a modification on the tacit cause social interaction, how the right to confidentiality has changed to the right to publicity, the autonomy of the mobile communication more than the mobility itself. Castells also is always remember that it's more linked with the autonomy rather than mobility itself. The space of flow and the time style, how it is invading our privacy, the state of the always on, how also these networks could be so smart regarding being only on the virtual space, the relevance of these mediated interactions, but also the anxiety about the ignorance of other states. We remember here Sennett when he was linking Goffman and Meyerowitz. In this personal, well, here in this concept you could also start to perceive it's a communication society, it's a personal communication society. My scope. Specifically with youths, this fluidity of identity, the tethered self, always attached to the mobile, the camera phone as the central device, the tethered self was also this monitoring, following Giselle, but is one of the questions that Professor Antonio Fidalgo made to Scott when how we are dealing with the mobile devices. Also the multi-phase, and recently the fear of missing out, which is already categorized as an illness by the American Psychologist Association. Well, now there is another movement with the joy of missing out, but well, this is another story. Regarding specifically technology and how technology shapes ourselves, remembering McLuhan, this mediated memories, because never before in the history we have dealt with such amount of data, being able to see our recordings, our path, so how we deal with that, even more when there is an interest, and a commercial interest before that. Architecture of intimacy or disclosure, or deterministic screens, or the desire for more, or the design of exposure have been concepts to describe the interface design of these platforms. They are specifically designed for this reason. How the context is important for us when we deal, introduced by Nissenbaum. The different dimensions on the impact of this digital literacy regarding privacy, when we could appreciate that there was limitations on the sections between our knowledge, our real knowledge. Maybe we know about it, but in reality there is a gap link with action. Maybe because of disconnection with our nervous system. I don't know, I throw you the question. Also, even we know we are under the gaze of surveillance, we don't seem to care. So, very worrying. Framing in a polysemic character of privacy. Well, we always know that each of us have a different perception, but specifically nowadays there is a highlight regarding the concerns about privacy, about this polysemic character of privacy. The different abilities we should know on the social media, attention, capability of attention, of trust and participation, collaboration, and clever use of networks, persistence, all that, lead us to this context about the invisible audiences. We are really do not know or are not aware about the possible audiences that are going to see our content. in the sense that Break has identified as time and memory as a key points. Well, concerning our abilities or our potential uses of that, there is also a debate between the affordability of these devices and the real affordances we could manage, and also as a characteristic of this spreadability, no, of the new media between the mass and collaborative culture itself. It's a key point also identified by Davis recently. So those potential assets and concrete risks, even we are aware of it, they are too remote to influence user decisions, especially when compared with the immediate and tangible benefits of that same sharing. Once more, we see here the importance of emotion. Well, in a more legal perspective, we have two very different approaches. One is the European Union, which is pretty theoretical, and also they want to include everything, but the geography of the supplier gives a problem, because they always have to deal with an international companies, so it's really difficult to establish a law that involves everybody. And then we have the US and Asia tendencies, where I believe in the market to dominate this debate in a trying future. So, never, as we saw, as we told, never before in the history, humanity have so many people monitored, recorded, and report so many details about such a large audience. The freedom, as remember in the presentation of Professor Bento, to construct our personal identities online is no longer the freedom of anonymity, rather it's the freedom associated with self-determination and autonomy, as far as users could manage that. Because it's a very uncontrolled searching for that big data. And it's like remembering Proust, Acon's book, but with us as co-authors. So, being a very quick review, this lack of awareness of the immediate risk, the lack of rationality of users when providing personal data, the relevance of the temporal priority and literacy, as well as the limitations, no, between interaction, well, knowledge and action, experiences intimately related to memory, legal risks from a technical perspective and from users' behaviors online lead us to a very worrying environment. No? Even more if privacy policies and terms and conditions are described as ambitions, but as very ambiguous. To end up with this quick international review, well, they started to dig into this normative behavior that these platforms produce on us. They are very tools of shaping identities. Because when we are discussing this, how far these technologies could go, they really could reach the identity. Yes, but, academics like Van Dijk, they say that, no? And also go even more about talking about this filtered reality, this filtered world, and regarding data, the quantify itself, the obsession to quantify everything. Right now there is an app that measures how you are in love with somebody. So let's see if we could, how could we measure that? The algorithmic self, and all these platforms profiting this natural and inner disposition of humans to share. It's analyzed by Ermida concerning journalism and social media. Critics have this want to convert us as neoliberal subjects, but on the other side, the same critics also see the potential of a new communist introduced by Fox. Well, this data concept refers to this willing of everybody trying to measure everything, this cumulative self-representation. Once more, remembering the presentation of Professor Bento, privacy, precisely because it ensures we never fully know to others or to ourselves, provides a shelter of imaginative freedom, curiosity and self-reflection. So to defend the private life is to defend the very possibility of creative and meaningful life. Well, this result comes from psychology and neurosciences area, but I think it's very important to know that our memories are linked to a specific location in the brain. It means that memories, we always relate memories to a place. In this sense, it's curious to observe how location is one of the main areas people are trying to avoid or to respect their privacy as well as to reveal it. So there is a psychological and neuro scientific explanation for that, because really memories are tied to a place in the brain. Well, the modulations of intimacy introduced by Amparo, the network privatives by Scott, and this network privacy, as well as the communication of Professor Ricardo, and to end up to this very quick review a recent paper introduced by Katz when he's introducing these new concepts about the virtual two dimensions, virtual cohabitation, and virtual accompaniment and new interactants, meaning, for example, pets. It was very, or babies. This is a research made within Skype. And some very curious was that people really believe on the other side of the screen that both the pets or the babies were looking or listening at them. And in fact, it's very difficult that a pet or a baby. But they really feel like that. They really feel through Skype that these pets or these babies were listening to them. The second step of our study, and also following these tools as a tool that save ourselves, we delve into how operative system works. Due to, I have to be very short, I will just to explain you that after a very deep examination, as far as technology allow us, because always there is a gap, we cannot go into. I made it with colleague Marco Oliveira, who is a computer engineer. And we also perceived that these operative systems were experiencing a process of liquidity. It means Apple start close, Android generally is open, but they are starting to get closer. We do not know if they are going to reach a meeting point, but the fact is they are getting closer. It means, for example, that Apple is starting to be more open regarding some programs, while Android is starting to try to defend the privacy of the users, getting some programs closed. In a practical way for the user, no? For the common user. For example, Apple allow you to alter all the privacy settings and configurations from the same operative system and also from every application. In the case of Android, no, it's not possible to alter those privacy settings and configurations from the operative system. You have to, every time, in each application, configure that. And even more, once you have settled that, if you want to change it, you have to restart the program. Well, in this second stage, we also take some results from the focus group and the interviews. We installed it and we experienced it, and we are going to present you very quick some results. That the lack of control about how and who access to the data is the main concern for users. However, they do not take many actions to prevent, except localization related to memory. And once more to our emotion, it's curious how we could perceive that at the same time that we are flowing or letting ourselves flow unconsciously because of emotion, also emotion protects us from that. No? For example, it's curious why localization is the main characteristic in the privacy settings that people avoid to use. Well, in more practical ways, an example of this volatility and ambiguity of the terms and conditions, Google cannot guarantee the full delete of users' information. And none of them, we analyze Google, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn as platforms, as applications, being WhatsApp, lean Instagram, being WhatsApp and Line as application. Well, none of them have a specific data protection policy and leaving this question to the user's good sense. And it's curious because they say it that way. We leave to the user's good sense. In the privacy policies, you can read that way. So, bearing in mind these defining features of the smartphones, like the instantaneity, ubiquity, concern and literacy, the continuous partial attention, and its relation with memory, the lack of rationality in some attitudes and performances, the limitations on the extension between the knowledge and the action, the strong circumstantial behavior we have observed in the users, as well as the volatility and ambiguity of the terms and conditions, and in the liquidity and mobility of our society and technology itself, all users deal with these liquid spheres where the constant data flow escapes from a clear awareness of it and the notion of the risk involved indeed. So users manage a constant negotiation of circumstances based on the evaluation of each scenario framed by this ambiguity and this immediacy, which also determines the reflectivity, the required time to analyze, as well as the perception of the risk involved in every reaction. Moreover, the possibility of receiving stimuli of all types constantly influences how to establish the priority level properly, as well as how to protect their privacy at the different layers and stages according to these possibilities. The third step in our research was focused on an education for privacy in the digital environment, focusing on youths. And here we using the thematic analysis technique in the methodology, we perceive these main topics, concerning privacy. Control. You are aware about the thematic analysis methodology, how it works? Yes. Yeah. Well, it's a process that instead of having preconcepts, we try to define the topics from the languages and from the results. It's the other way around. We do not establish categories before, we establish the categories after. So it was really nice to see that they develop control strategies of privacy, however they are weak. They trust on the capacity of choice of the actor, which is nice because they trust on themselves, but the problem is that they trust also on companies. So this is this digital naive concept introduced by Boyd. The invasion of privacy, but mainly it was regarding parents. They do not like parents to publish pictures of themselves. The violation of privacy, the alienation of control, so as they are aware. When, for example, when they install applications and they recognize they do not read, they maybe because others do that, they recognize that they are being alienated, but they do not care or they do not delve into that because they value more that quick feedback or the emotion involved in that. It's just as simple as that, no? I'm worried in those sense. And the surveillance, well, this false sense of control, because they completely trust on the choices of the subject, as we have to explain, allow us to follow the concept developed by Dana Boyd when they call this youth the digital natives. But as we have been discussing yesterday at night, it's not only youth but also adult people and widespread. There was also a lack of awareness about the visible imagined audiences, and also about the characteristics of the social media, which we were mentioning before. So, and here is where I started to think about the constellation concept, because I perceive that there is a notion of privacy. Maybe it's very wide range, maybe it's more wide range than before, that something we have to deal with, but people have a notion of privacy. So for me, the concept of liquid spheres applied to privacy was starting not to suit, because we have that notion of privacy, of intimacy. What happens is that instead of that, we are constantly changing our conception of privacy, maybe due to emotion, maybe lack of rationality, lack of reflection. Let's see. But the thing is that we are constantly changing that, so that's my reason to introduce this constellation concept, because we are all the time constructing and deconstructing this privacy and this intimacy. For this, we have based, as well as Ricardo has explained, on different methodologies, online and offline surveys, about mainly general uses and also about privacy regarding data and images. It was remembering this personal brand about the social media. I am happy to say that we achieved 657 answers, only using our personal brand as a project. I mean, emailing and contacting with Anna and emailing things. Why? Because it was planned and it was a requirement of the European Union to develop with a consultant, an official consultant, this national survey. They achieved 507. So, well, I think we do it quite well in this sense, just with our personal brand. Well, and regarding content analysis, we analyze, as we have told, the privacy policies, terms and conditions, student essays. I think that it was very, very interesting for me. It was 44 students. Allow them to write. It's also have been proved recently that our capacity, what we develop writing, couldn't be achieved even writing on the computer. I mean, the whole process for our brain to write develops a capacity of reflection that until now it couldn't be achieved through a computer, even we are writing through a computer. So in this sense, I really appreciate how my students develop the concept of privacy writing an essay about that. And it was very, very interesting. And also match the results from the other methodologies. So let's see, we are in the, in the right path. So I would like to share this experience with you. Well, we also analyze social networks, Twitter and Reddit. Here we perceive that most of the conversations were just to share. Well, I would like to profit that Ana is there, Sara and Pedro and Filomena. They are also fellowships of our project, and they have been obviously involved in collecting all this data. What we have perceived about Twitter and Reddit was that they used this tool just to share some kind of strategies, information, links about how to protect. But there was not a real debate about privacy at that point. Even in Instagram, when we have to try to collect images that may be suitable for our project, well, all the hashtags regarding privacy, digital identity, personal brand, whatever, most of the cases, they do not match to the topic. I mean, they use a highly used hashtag just to achieve a visibility of the images. But maybe it was a hashtag about I don't know, instant mood, what I find it very, very curious. But instant mood was not related to the images of a mood. It was just that they used that hashtag, because this hashtag was trending topic, to put whatever kind of images there. Well, we also developed a focus group within different stages, youth, adolescents, seniors. It was very interesting doing the focus group with seniors, interviews by person and by telephone, ethnography observation, and also digital ethnography in Facebook. Well, so as I started to perceive that the liquid spheres maybe are not working here anymore, this was the 3 stages I consider, or I find that could be sweet to trying to categorize or trying to divide all the results from our studies. But what these 3 dimensions: overall user habits and privacy, managing accounts and privacy, and then the last step, managing media and privacy. So let's go to our conclusions. These conclusions are also matched. This is an upcoming chapter. It's not published, but it will be soon published. And we all not only make a comparison within the Portuguese population, but also within research from the Pew Research, from Canada, from Asia, from many countries that we have those data to have a perspective. No? So users worldwide are aware of this system of the big data, but they lack the proper attitudes and knowledge to manage their accounts. Despite difference between countries, no, and technological development, obviously, and market implementation, it's a key point. Well, we could talk about some overall tendencies, despite, obviously, these country differences. Well, users recognize some of the existing and potential risks of surfing the web, but there is always a gap, a very clear gap between their notions and their final actions. Half of these users allow their personal information to be used, completely used. They recognize freely and no problem with that, to access the different kinds of services for free, even if they acknowledge that their information they share as personal. We have the case we commented yesterday about a Canadian research that half of the users, for a good price, they will sell their personal information. Half of internet users have concerns about the terms and conditions, as well as data policies of the apps, which are very difficult to understand properly, but at the same time they admit not reading them, and in most cases, just because a friend have accepted, they accept it as well. Specifically within our project, half of the users accept an app installation, firstly because others have done it before, and secondly because they trust the companies or simply do not read them. In this sense, we point at as further lines of research to develop clearer and user-centered policies. Well, this is not only my conclusion, it's an overall international concern about that. According to the difference between countries and regarding the mobile appropriation and performances, well, basic functions like making calls and then receiving messages are still the main functions, no? Non-voice activities, which is the curious, a smartphone, phone, but non-voice activities linked to them. Well, in the case of Portugal, they exceed the European average in terms of accessing and using the social networks. Overall and worldwide, there is also a manifest tendency towards the increased use of the social networks, where youth played a lead role. They share a concern about who has access to the content and the related lack of control. But they have approved completely unconsciously about the potential invisible audiences to be dealt with and the possibility of misunderstanding the complexity and subjective interpretations of big data and data names. They mix the concept of profile, digital identity. Well, they are not really aware of how these platforms work. Well, they take preliminary steps to avoid the data synchronization between accounts and contacts, but they mix the concept, no? as we have told. Most users are not completely aware of the digital paths they produce. And well, and further research lines, we consider that should analyze these user perceptions and performances, as well as raise awareness about data aims, about this, because well, we are shaping our identity in some term with these tools. So I think it's a very this recent line of research, developed also by Walter Redberg, by Pandik, also police here, about raising awareness about how these tools shape not only our online identity, but also our offline one. Well, as for the user perceptions, about an understanding of privacy, our preliminary results, I say preliminary because all colleagues, that well, maybe you could have all your data, but to really reflect on the data, sometimes you need a lot of time to build. Now we are in these preliminary results, no, the more quickest ones, but I would like to have a bit more to really say this is the results, no, or this is the conclusions. Much that ones from the peer research developed, and also other ones developed, I do not include it here, but developed in Australia. So there's a constellation of concepts that has emerged among the users, which translated into a correlation between this Bauman liquidity and our hypothesis about the liquidity in the mobile ecosystem, no? Previously stated by Awal. And also about these fluidification parameters of the technological, institutional and cultural media dimensions described by Manuel. So we have this sociability, coordination and its maintenance, different perceptions about why privacy is, strong circumstantial and pattern behavior, constant negotiation of rules, lack of rationality in some attitudes and performances, awareness, no? Lack of awareness. Awareness of some risks but not delving into them, and consciousness about the invisible audiences, and awareness about the digital path and data aims. So, remember the first slide. Well, I think that I would like to share with you. I am saying you that I am just moving about these two concepts. We seem to be dealing, rather than with liquid spheres, in a liquid environment, that's for sure, media ecology, creating these constellations of spheres delimited by our autonomy rather than mobility. Because we were talking about mobile, but instead of mobility, I would like to prefer to say autonomy, and framed by the timeless time. So, give thanks, thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope that I have not speak so quick and pass very quick through some stages, and expect that everything is understood, and thank you very much.